My name is Sophia, I'm 31. The day my father's will was unveiled, my stepmother, Caroline, stared right at me and said, "Well, I guess dreams don't always come true, do they, sweetheart?" She was talking about the lake house, my mother's creation before she passed when I was 12. The house where I'd spent every summer of my childhood, where Mom painted watercolors on the wraparound porch, and where she taught me to recognize every bird nesting in the old oaks. That house should have been mine. Instead, it went to Caroline's daughter, Brittany, my 23-year-old stepsister, who'd been there exactly twice in the 8 years since Dad remarried. Brittany called it that musty old place, and whined about the poor cell reception. I sat in the lawyer's office, hands folded in my lap, the obedient daughter I'd always been, while Caroline's grin grew wider as the attorney read on. Dad's architectural firm, the one I had practically run for the past 3 years, was split between Caroline and Brittany. The investment accounts, the stock portfolio, even Dad's vintage camera collection, which he had promised me, all went to Caroline. "There must be some mistake," I said softly. "No mistake," Caroline replied, her tone sickly sweet. "Your father was very clear about what he wanted. He wanted to make sure his real family was taken care of." The words hit like a punch to the chest, real family. After 18 years of being his daughter, of late nights at the firm, of holding his hand through chemo, of organizing his funeral while Caroline cried helplessly, none of that counted. I left that office with exactly what Caroline had always intended me to have. Nothing. But she'd made a grave miscalculation. She thought I was still the fragile little girl who cried herself to sleep when Dad first brought her home. She thought I was still the teenager desperate for her approval, swallowing insults and enduring exclusion in silence. Caroline had no idea who I'd become. The first call I made was to my mentor, Margaret Chen, the woman who had guided me through my Wharton MBA and now ran one of the top private equity firms on the East Coast. "I need a job," I said, "and I need to vanish for a while." "What happened with the family business?" Margaret asked. "It's complicated," I replied. She paused. Margaret had known me for 6 years, watched me present to boardrooms full of men twice my age, negotiate multi-million-dollar deals. She knew I didn't ask for help lightly. "How soon can you start?" 2 weeks later, I was in Manhattan, working from Margaret's glass tower, applying everything I'd learned, not just from school, but from years of watching Dad build his firm from scratch. Only now, instead of designing buildings, I was designing acquisitions. I dove into work with a ferocity that only comes from having nothing to lose. 18-hour days became routine. I read balance sheets like poems, spotted weaknesses in companies the way Dad had taught me to spot flaws in blueprints. "You're turning ruthless," Margaret remarked one evening as we went over a particularly aggressive takeover I had structured. "Good," I said. For 2 years, I didn't speak to Caroline or Brittany. I heard bits and pieces through mutual acquaintances. The architectural firm was floundering. Apparently, losing the person who'd managed most of the clients and projects had consequences. Who could have guessed? Brittany had moved into the lake house but rarely stayed. Chicago was her true home. Caroline, I heard, had begun taking loans against Dad's life insurance. I filed everything away like puzzle pieces, waiting. Then came the call that changed the game. "Sophia," the voice trembled. It took me a moment to realize it was Brittany. "This is a surprise," I said calmly. "Look, I know things between us have been complicated, but I need to ask you something about the firm." I waited. "We're in trouble. Big trouble. Caroline's trying to run it, but she doesn't understand the business. And I'm still in school." Her voice faltered. "We might lose everything." "I'm sorry," I said. "I know you're frustrated about the will. But Dad wouldn't have wanted the company to collapse." She was right. 30 years of his blood, sweat, and vision. The thought of it disappearing could have gutted me. Instead, I felt something else, opportunity. "Send me the financials," I said. They were worse than I'd imagined. Clients gone, money bleeding out, facing a lawsuit from an unpaid contractor. Staff reduced from 15 to 6. If nothing changed, bankruptcy was inevitable within 6 months. I spent a week crafting my plan. Then I called Brittany. "I have a solution," I said. "But you won't like it." We met at a coffee shop near her university. Brittany looked older, drained, far from the entitled girl who'd inherited everything. "I can save the firm," I told her. "I have the capital, the connections, and the know-how. But I don't work for free." "How much?" she asked. "Controlling interest. 60%. Her face went pale. "Sophia, I can't. Caroline will never." "Caroline doesn't have a choice." Sell to me or watch 30 years of Dad's work vanish. That's it. I slid a folder across the table. Here's my offer. Fair, more than fair. You and Caroline keep 40% and remain consultants. The firm survives, employees keep their jobs, and Dad's legacy endures. Brittany opened the folder with shaking hands. I had valued the company generously, nearly double its current worth. It was a lifeline, and we both knew it. I need to speak with Caroline, she whispered. 48 hours, I said. 36 hours later, Caroline called. Her voice was ice, barely restrained fury. You manipulative little. This was your plan all along. Actually, no, I replied evenly. My plan was to build my own life and never think of either of you again. But you forced my hand when you let Dad's company crumble. We're not selling, she spat. Then bankruptcy will finish you. The lawsuit alone is enough. Silence. I could almost hear Caroline's mind racing, hunting for a loophole, a backdoor. But I had spent years learning to see every angle, anticipate every move. 51%, she finally offered. 60-55, I countered calm, almost kind. This isn't a negotiation. I'm giving you a chance to save something Dad built. Take it or leave it. On a Thursday morning in November, exactly 3 years after Dad's funeral, the papers were signed. I walked into the conference room where Caroline and Brittany sat with their lawyer, looking as though they were attending their own sentencing. Thank you for coming, I said, taking my seat at the head of the table, Dad's chair, the one Caroline had claimed. The signing took less than an hour. When it was over, Caroline rose slowly, her face a mask of barely contained fury. You think you've won, she spat. I looked at her, at the woman who'd spent nearly a decade making me feel like I didn't belong, twisting my grieving father against his own daughter, calling me a liar when I tried to tell him the truth about her. Caroline, I said quietly, I stopped caring about winning the day you told a 12-year-old that her mother wasn't special. Back then, all I cared about was surviving. Now, I care about honoring Dad by making sure his work doesn't die because you were too proud to admit you were in over your head. I straightened my skirt and stood tall. But since you brought it up, yes, I did win. I won the moment I realized I didn't need your approval or your inheritance to become who I was meant to be. I turned to Brittany, who had stayed silent throughout. I'll see you Monday morning. We have a company to rebuild. As I reached the door, Caroline called after me, venom in her voice. Your father would be ashamed of you. For a second, I felt the old familiar ache, the 12-year-old Sophia, crying in her room because Caroline had given away my mother's jewelry. A stab of doubt. Then I thought of the employees who would have jobs next month, the clients calling to say they wanted to work with the firm again, the blueprints that would come alive because I refused to let Dad's legacy collapse. Maybe, I said without looking back, but my mother would be proud. 6 months later, the firm was thriving again. Within a year, we landed the company's largest project yet, a new art center downtown. I rehired every employee Caroline had laid off and added 5 more. I didn't reclaim the lake house through manipulation or force. I kept it because Brittany, after a year under my leadership, learning what it meant to earn instead of inherit, came to me one December evening with a proposal. I want to give you something, she said, placing a deed on my desk. Brittany, let me finish. The lake house isn't just property. It's where your mom lived and dreamed, where she built a life for your family. Caroline was wrong to take it, and I was wrong to accept it without question. I looked down at the deed, my vision blurring. Besides, Brittany added, a small smile tugging at her lips, I never liked that commute anyway. I found a condo downtown, walking distance to the office. That summer, I returned to the lake house for the first time in 4 years. Sitting on the wraparound porch where Mom had painted her watercolors, watching the birds she taught me to recognize, I felt her presence in every weathered board, every sun-faded shingle. Caroline never contacted me again. I heard she moved to Arizona, closer to her sister. Sometimes I wonder if she ever realized that Dad's true inheritance wasn't money, property, or even the firm. It was the proof that I was strong enough to build my own legacy, and wise enough to know the difference between justice and revenge. The lake house still smells faintly of Mom's lavender soap. I like to think she would have appreciated the irony. The daughter Caroline tried to diminish had become the one to preserve everything that truly mattered. Sometimes the best revenge isn't a scheme or a grudge. It's refusing to be small, no matter how hard someone tries to shrink you. Sometimes it's creating something so enduring that the doubters have no choice but to admire it. And sometimes, if you're very fortunate, It's returning home to the place you were always meant to belong.